Australia, often depicted as a land of stunning natural beauty, abundant resources and a high standard of living, faces a multitude of issues that some argue have left the nation broken. This sentiment is not rooted in one particular failing, but in a complex web of interconnected social, economic, political, and environmental problems. One of the most glaring signs of a broken system in Australia is its political instability. The frequent change of leadership since 2007, with 6 different prime ministers in just over a decade, highlights a tumultuous political landscape. This constant turnover has led to a lack of continuity in policymaking. Each new government has tended to undo or significantly alter the policies of its predecessor, creating a cycle of short-termism. Key areas such as climate change, energy policy, education, and healthcare have been subjected to this stop-start approach, resulting in a lack of coherent long-term strategies. For instance, climate policy has been particularly contentious. Successive governments have oscillated between commitments to reduce carbon emissions and support for fossil fuel industries, particularly coal, a significant contributor to Australia's economy. This back and forth has not only frustrated the electorate but has also created uncertainty for businesses and investors. The inability to forge a bipartisan agreement on such critical issues indicates a political system that is struggling to address complex, long-term challenges effectively. Australia is uniquely vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. The catastrophic bushfires of 2019 to 2020, known as the Black Summer, were a wake-up call, devastating vast areas of land, killing or displacing nearly 3 billion animals, and causing significant economic and emotional tolls on affected communities. Despite this, Australia's response to the climate crisis has been criticized as inadequate and at times counterproductive. The country is one of the world's largest exporters of coal and natural gas, and its economy has long been tied to the fossil fuel industry. This economic dependence has made it politically challenging to fully commit to reducing carbon emissions and transitioning to renewable energy sources. The environmental degradation extends beyond climate change. Issues such as deforestation, water scarcity, and the decline of the Great Barrier Reef, a World Heritage Site, are symptomatic of a broader environmental crisis. The Murray-Darling Basin, one of Australia's most vital water systems, has been over-extracted and poorly managed, leading to ecological collapse in some areas. These environmental concerns reflect a failure to balance economic growth with sustainable practices, revealing a nation struggling to protect its natural heritage while maintaining its economic prosperity. While Australia boasts a strong economy and relatively high GDP per capita, this prosperity is not evenly distributed. Economic inequality has been on the rise, with wealth increasingly concentrated among the top echelons of society. Meanwhile, many Australians face stagnant wages, insecure employment, and rising living costs. One of the most visible manifestations of this inequality is the housing affordability crisis. Major cities like Sydney and Melbourne rank among the most expensive in the world for real estate, making home ownership an unattainable dream for many, particularly younger Australians. This has contributed to growing intergenerational inequality, as wealth is often tied to property ownership. High housing costs also lead to increased household debt, putting financial strain on families and affecting their overall quality of life. The housing market, driven by speculative investment and favorable tax policies such as negative gearing, has become a battleground between the needs of everyday Australians and the interests of investors and developers. Australia's treatment of its Indigenous peoples is a national tragedy that remains unresolved. Despite being home to the world's oldest continuous cultures, Indigenous Australians face significant disadvantages. Life expectancy for Indigenous Australians is substantially lower than for non-Indigenous Australians, and they experience higher rates of unemployment, incarceration, and chronic health conditions. Efforts to close the gap in health, education, and economic outcomes have been slow and, in many cases, ineffective. The historical and ongoing marginalization of Indigenous peoples raises questions about Australia's national identity and its ability to reconcile with its past. While there have been some positive steps, such as the formal apology to the stolen generations in 2008 and land rights movements, these actions have not fully translated into tangible improvements in living conditions or social equality. The call for a constitutionally enshrined Indigenous voice to Parliament, a body proposed to advise on policies affecting Indigenous communities, remains a contentious political issue, illustrating the broader struggle to integrate Indigenous perspectives into the nation's governance. Australia's healthcare system, while universal in nature, faces challenges in terms of access and quality. Rural and remote communities in particular often lack adequate healthcare services, leading to disparities in health outcomes. Mental health is a critical and growing concern. Rising rates of mental illness, including anxiety, depression, and suicide, particularly among young people, indicate a mental health crisis that is not being adequately addressed. The system is often criticized for being underfunded and difficult to navigate, leaving many individuals without the support they need. The strain on the healthcare system is also exacerbated by an aging population. As the median age of Australians increases, the demand for healthcare services, aged care, and support systems rises, posing significant economic and social challenges for the future. Australia has a long history of immigration, and its multicultural society is often celebrated as one of its great strengths. However, this narrative is complicated by contentious immigration policies, particularly towards asylum seekers and refugees. Australia's policy of offshore detention, where asylum seekers attempting to arrive by boat are detained in facilities on Nauru and Manus Island, has been widely condemned for its harsh conditions and indefinite detention practices. These policies have sparked global criticism and have been described as a violation of human rights. Moreover, the country has seen a rise in nationalist and anti-immigrant sentiments, which have sometimes manifested in discriminatory rhetoric and policies. This tension challenges Australia's self-image as a diverse and inclusive society. It raises questions about how the nation can reconcile its multicultural identity with policies and attitudes that sometimes seem at odds with this ideal. Australia's economic reliance on the resources sector, particularly mining and fossil fuels, presents a significant challenge in a world increasingly focused on sustainability and renewable energy. The global shift towards decarbonization threatens Australia's traditional economic model, necessitating a transition to new industries and forms of employment. However, this transition is fraught with difficulties, including potential job losses in established industries and the need for substantial investment in education, training, and infrastructure to support emerging sectors. The labor market is also facing disruption due to technological advancements and the rise of the gig economy. While these changes offer opportunities for innovation and economic growth, they also create uncertainty for workers, many of whom face precarious employment conditions, underemployment, and the erosion of traditional job security and benefits. Australia's geopolitical environment is becoming increasingly complex, particularly as it navigates its relationship with China, its largest trading partner, and the United States, its principal security ally. The growing influence of China in the Asia-Pacific region has led to strategic tensions, forcing Australia to balance its economic interests with national security concerns. The Australian government has faced criticism for its handling of this delicate relationship, with some arguing that it has not effectively communicated or managed the economic and security implications of its foreign policy decisions. Furthermore, Australia's role in the Pacific region has been scrutinized, particularly regarding climate change and regional security. Pacific Island nations, some of the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, have criticized Australia for its perceived lack of leadership and commitment to addressing climate-related issues, further complicating its international standing. The perception that Australia is broken arises from a multifaceted set of challenges that the country faces. Political instability, environmental crises, economic inequality, social injustice, healthcare shortcomings, immigration tensions, and geopolitical complexities all contribute to a picture of a nation struggling to reconcile its values with the realities of the modern world. While Australia remains a country with immense potential, natural beauty, and a relatively high quality of life, these deep-rooted issues cannot be ignored. Addressing these challenges requires visionary leadership, a willingness to embrace difficult conversations, and a collective commitment to forging a path toward a more equitable, sustainable, and inclusive future. This will involve reimagining Australia's identity, both domestically and on the world stage, in a way that genuinely reflects its diverse population, respects its Indigenous heritage, and prioritizes the long-term health of its society and environment.